Welcome to another deep dive. Today we're going super small
Oh, yeah.
to the world of spider mites.
Okay.
And we're looking at them under a particular light, so to speak.
Okay.
You sent me this fascinating review article
Right.
all about the effects of ultraviolet radiation on spider mites.
Uh-huh.
So it's called Biological Impact of Ultraviolet B Radiation on Spider Mites and its Application in Integrated Pest Management.
Yeah, that's the one.
It's a lot to unpack, so we're going to go through it carefully.
Sounds good.
And I think the listeners will find it really interesting.
I think so, too.
So one of the first things that jumped out at me was that spider mites, well, most of them anyway,
Yeah.
especially the two-spotted spider mite, they really don't seem to like the sun.
No, they don't.
They're always hiding from it.
Right.
Why is that?
Well, think about it from their perspective.
Okay.
You know, they're tiny,
Yeah.
microscopic even.
Right.
And that intense sunlight to them, it would be like us humans trying to sunbathe under a giant magnifying glass.
Wow. Yeah, that's a good point. I never thought of it like that.
Yeah, it's pretty intense for those little guys.
So they're not just being shy. They're actually
Right.
trying to survive.
Exactly.
It's a survival tactic.
Yeah, and the article even mentions this field study in an apple orchard
Uh-huh.
where they found a whopping 99% of the spider mites on the underside of the leaves.
Oh, 99%. That's pretty telling.
Yeah, they definitely prefer the shade.
But here's where it gets a little tricky.
Ew.
Because not all spider mites are afraid of the sun.
That's right.
There's this one, the citrus red mite.
Uh-huh.
It actually seems to prefer the upper surfaces of leaves.
Yeah, the sunny side.
So how do they manage that?
That's a great question.
I mean, do they have some kind of tiny umbrella?
Well, not quite an umbrella,
Okay.
but they might have something even better.
Oh,
A built-in sunscreen.
what?
Researchers think that a pigment called astaxanthin could be the key.
Astaxanthin?
Yeah.
Wait a minute. Isn't that what gives salmon and shrimp their pink color? So it's like a natural sunscreen.
It seems so.
Wow. It's amazing how these tiny creatures have evolved such clever ways to deal with the challenges in their environment.
It really is remarkable.
So we've got these sun avoiders and these sunbathers, but it's not just about the intensity of the sunlight, is it?
No, you're right.
It's also about the duration of exposure.
Exactly, and especially during certain stages of their life cycle.
Right. The article mentioned a study in Kyoto that found spider mite eggs were most vulnerable to UVB, not in the summer when the sun is strongest,
Right.
but in the spring.
Yeah, that seems counterintuitive at first.
It does.
But it turns out the warmer temperatures in the fall actually lead to shorter development time for the eggs.
Okay.
So by springtime, they've actually spent less time exposed to those harmful rays.
So it's like a delicate balance between temperature and UV exposure.
Exactly. Even small shifts can have a big impact.
And speaking of vulnerability, the article mentions that there's a specific window in the spider mite life cycle where they're especially susceptible to UVB damage.
Yeah, during the first 24 to 48 hours after the eggs are laid.
Oh, so like right at the beginning.
Right. It's a critical period for development. And even short bursts of UVB can be really harmful.
It's like a race against time for these little embryos.
It is. They need to develop quickly to outpace that UV threat.
But then there's this whole other concept. The article talks about photoreactivation.
Oh, yes.
What is that exactly?
So photoreactivation is a process where light, and I'm talking specifically UVA and visible light,
Okay.
can actually repair some of the damage caused by UVB.
Wait, so light can heal too?
Yeah, it's like a built-in repair system.
Incredible.
These special enzymes called photolysases use light energy to fix the damaged DNA.
So it's not an instant death sentence if a spider mite gets hit with some UVB.
Not necessarily.
There's a chance for recovery if they're exposed to the right kind of light afterward.
Exactly. They've got this amazing ability to use light for both good and bad.
It's fascinating. And this discovery has actually led to some really interesting developments in using UVB for pest control.
It has. Yeah, it's like something out of a sci-fi movie, you know?
Yeah, using light to fight pests.
Exactly.
So the review talks about how scientists are using UVB lamps in strawberry greenhouses
Right.
to control spider mite populations. But wouldn't that harm the good guys too?
You mean the predatory mites?
Yeah, the ones that naturally help keep the spider mites in check.
Right. Good point. You don't want to disrupt that balance.
Exactly. So how do they avoid that?
Well, they figured out a pretty clever workaround.
Okay.
They irradiate the greenhouses at midnight.
Midnight. Why midnight?
Because at night, there's no sunlight to trigger that photoreactivation process.
Oh, right. So the spider mites get the full dose of UVB.
Exactly. But the predatory mites have a chance to recover during the day when the sunlight can help repair any damage.
So it's like a strategic nighttime attack.
You could say that.
minimizing collateral damage.
Right, and maximizing the impact on the pests.
I'm also curious about something else. The review mentions that UVB is effective against powdery mildew.
A common fungal disease that affects a lot of plants.
Right. So does this mean we're hitting two birds with one stone?
That's exactly what it means. The wavelengths that are most effective against powdery mildew are very similar to those that target spider mites.
So it's a win-win for the strawberry growers.
Absolutely. They can control both pests and diseases with a single treatment.
Wow, that's amazing. But are there any downsides to using UVB in this way?
Well, you have to be careful about the dosage and timing.
Okay.
Too much UVB can damage the plants themselves.
Right, and what about the beneficial insects?
Well, like we talked about before, using UVB at night helps protect them.
Yeah, smart.
And there's ongoing research into developing even more targeted approaches.
So like finding that sweet spot where the UVB is effective against the pests, but doesn't harm the plants or the good bugs.
Precisely, it's a delicate balance.
This next part completely blew my mind.
Okay.
The review mentions that pollen, which is a food source for predatory mites,
Right.
can actually boost their resistance to UVB radiation.
Yeah, that's a fascinating finding.
It's like they're getting their sunscreen from their lunch.
It is kind of like the pollen contains these powerful antioxidants.
Right, like what we find in fruits and vegetables.
Exactly, but in pollen, they're even more concentrated.
So the predatory mites are not only getting a meal,
Right.
they're also getting extra protection from the sun.
It's like a 2-for-1 deal.
Incredible. It really shows how everything is connected in this ecosystem.
It does, and it highlights how important it is to consider these connections when we're developing new pest control strategies.
Yeah, we don't want to disrupt the natural balance.
Right, the goal is to work with nature, not against it.
So zooming out a bit, the review seems really optimistic about the potential of UVB technology to revolutionize integrated pest management,
It's a very promising approach.
especially when it comes to sustainability.
Absolutely, because it's a physical method of control.
Right.
It doesn't rely on chemical pesticides.
Which can have all sorts of unintended consequences.
Exactly, for the environment and for human health.
And we've already talked about how UVB can be applied in a targeted way to minimize harm to beneficial insects in the plants.
Right, it's a much more nuanced approach than just spraying everything with pesticides.
And the review also mentions the possibility of combining UVB treatments with other biological control methods
Yes, like introducing predatory mites or even using pollen supplements.
to boost their resistance.
Exactly, so it becomes a multifaceted approach.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
It's like we're learning to work with nature's own defenses.
That's a great way to put it. Instead of always resorting to chemical warfare.
We're finding these elegant and targeted strategies.
All right, and as we learn more about the intricate relationships in these ecosystems, we can develop even more effective and sustainable solutions.
So this deep dive into spider mites and UVB has really highlighted the importance of understanding these complex interactions.
It has, and it's also shown us the incredible ingenuity of both nature and science.
Right, like how spider mites have evolved these amazing adaptations to deal with UV radiation, and how scientists are using that knowledge to develop innovative pest control strategies.
Exactly, it's a really exciting field.
But the review also touches on a more sobering topic, the potential impact of climate change.
Right, because as we've seen, spider mites are very sensitive to changes in temperature and UVB levels.
Yeah, so any shifts in these factors caused by climate change could have a ripple effect throughout the ecosystem.
It's something we need to keep in mind as we move forward.
It makes you realize just how interconnected everything is.
Yeah, and how even small changes can have big consequences.
Yeah, it really is a reminder that we're all part of this delicate web of life.
We are.
But before we spiral into existential dread about climate change,
Right.
let's get back to the potential of UVB as a pest control tool.
Oh, okay.
The review seemed really optimistic about its role in creating a more sustainable future for agriculture.
Oh, absolutely.
One of the most promising things about it is that it's a physical control method.
Right.
So we're not relying on chemical pesticides.
Exactly, which is huge.
Yeah, no harmful residues, no risk of pests developing resistance.
Right, and it's much better for the environment.
Absolutely. And we've already talked about those targeted applications.
Like the midnight irradiations.
Yeah, minimizing harm to the beneficial insects and the plants themselves.
It's a much more precise approach.
And the review even suggests that we could combine UVB treatments with other biological controls.
Yeah, like introducing predatory mites
Right, or even using pollen supplements.
to boost their UVB resistance.
Exactly. It's like a multi-pronged attack.
It is a multifaceted approach.
And it's all about working with nature, not against it.
Right, using nature's own tools to protect our crops.
This deep dive has been a real eye-opener.
It has.
We've gone from these tiny spider mites hiding from the sun
Uh-huh.
to this whole world of UV radiation and its impact on these delicate ecosystems.
Yeah, and we've seen how scientists are harnessing that knowledge to develop really innovative pest control strategies.
It's been fascinating. So for anyone listening who's ever wondered about the hidden lives of these tiny creatures, or the power of light to shape our world,
Yeah.
well, this deep dive has hopefully given you a glimpse into that amazing and often overlooked universe.
I hope so too.
Thanks for joining us on this journey. And until next time, keep exploring, keep learning, and keep those curiosity lights burning bright.
Absolutely.